Hi, just a quick warning before we get started. This episode contains some potentially triggering topics, such as suicide, mental illness, PTSD, and the gun control debate. If any of these issues are potentially triggering for you, you may want to skip till later in the episode. Otherwise, we hope you'll join us for an important and timely conversation. Sapiophile. Noun. One who is attracted to intelligence. Join us, three fun-loving lovers of knowledge who are ready to dig into your favorite topics with our very own nerdy diatribes, words of wisdom, and takes on life as millennials. Welcome to the Sapiophiles. So we are joined today by a guest host, Miss Joanna. Would you like to tell us about you?
Hello. Well, my name is Joanna. I go by JoJo. 29, graduated my bachelor's degree in psychology, obsessed with Harry Potter, and I love to drink wine.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
As do I.
Yeah, cheers.
We all like psychology and wine. Those are great things. And if people haven't listened to our previous episode, we also love Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah. Because in the previous episode we talked about all of our houses, Joanna, tell them what house you're in.
I am a Ravendor. Mix of two. Best of both worlds right there.
Yep. Currently, JoJo and I are drinking Harpoon Camp One of mangoes.
And sweating our butts off.
Because it was meant to thunder and lightning here in Massachusetts today, and instead it did not. It rained a little bit, so I closed the windows in preparation for a thunderstorm. Which, listeners, I love, by the way. I love a good thunderstorm.
Amen.
Thunderstorms are fantastic.
It was not a thunderstorm kind of day. It was a rain kind of day, and I closed the windows for nothing, and now I'm trying to recool the house, and there's no AC.
Nope.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to storm here any second, but it's not as of yet. So
You're going to get our thunderstorms.
Lucky.
And Joanna, what kind of work are you in?
Well, right now I'm in customer service, but I was in the residential field for troubled young women for almost 3 years. And I've worked in the psychology field for how long?
Since graduation, right?
Since graduation, pretty much on and off. And I've seen, good Lord, a lot of things I couldn't even describe to you right now. It's been so crazy.
So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it's an important month for recognizing those with mental health issues and being able to support them and breaking the stigma. Mental health issues affect 1 in 4 Americans in any given year. So it's a huge percentage of the population. So we're talking Mental Health Awareness Month and different types of mental health. So some statistics on mental illness. Like I said before, it's 1 in 4 adults in the United States experiences mental illness in a year. Approximately 1 in 5 between 13 and 18 experiences mental illness. Over 90% of people who die by suicide have been dealing with a mental illness. It's the 10th leading cause of suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and the 3rd leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 14, and 2nd leading cause for 15 to 24. So mental illness is affecting the younger population. So what do we think about that? About the pressure and the prevalence of these kind of conditions on young people?
I think that with the dawn of all this technology, and like I mentioned before, and like 2 podcasts ago, with people seeing the greatest hits of everybody else on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and you have these people may or may not, they may have diagnosable mental health issues, but some of them may just be having like depressive episodes and everything. But then you have them comparing themselves to everybody on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and their brains aren't even fully developed yet, and you compile all that together, and it's like a perfect storm for
This is true.
suicide and depression, in my opinion.
It's the type of world that that causes tendencies towards something to become full-blown episodes.
Yes, exactly. So I think that like the propensity towards these type of reactions in this age group, especially with the society that we now live in, it's just all perpetuating itself. in my opinion, because it's not like mental health issues didn't exist a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's that there's something about today's society that's making, although the society is working to take away the stigma, I think that there's also so much surrounding, especially young people, that
They don't
even
feel good enough.
exactly.
Well, it's also, I think it has to do with the media. There's always this constant news cycle. So, you know, we could have had the same amount as before. It's just, it's reported now. Everybody hears about it. You know, back in the day, they didn't have the 24-hour news cycle. They didn't have all the social media sites, you know. It's just, I think it's more, there's just more awareness.
I also think there are more, in some ways, the society is doing a better job at breaking stigma, and in some ways, I feel like we backtracked.
I think it's both ways, yeah.
13 Reasons Why?
I've never seen it.
So I have some debates about that too.
Okay.
Not necessarily like I've read the book and seen the series, but I feel like the way the way that this series, sorry, I just spit all over myself.
You're crazy.
The way that this series covers the topic, it almost glorifies suicide. And I've actually heard about teenagers actually attempting suicide because of it.
That's a topic too, because the kids feel that they have to be part of like a bigger thing.
It makes it like, because obviously like you're watching a character and obviously like you see the actress afterwards and she's alive and she's thriving, but like, bless you.
Thank you.
But in that moment, like her character is dead, but
her spirit lives on.
Yeah, and I think kids are kind of taking that in a very romanticized, bless you kind of way.
I'm allergic to the damn cat.
I know, I'm sorry.
I love her, but shit.
I think they handled it all wrong. I think that it wasn't a realistic portrayal of suicide, and I agree with you that it was totally glorified. It was more effective if it was supposed to be a bullying story than a mental health story, because
they can go hand in hand, though.
They can, but the idea of, like, if you're going to kill yourself, if you're at the point where you're going to kill yourself, that you have all this energy to make all these tapes, to blame all these people, if you have energy to do that, you probably aren't at the point where you're going to kill yourself.
Yeah, they handle it much better in the book.
Yeah, books are better than...
like
that. Well, the books are always better.
The tapes are very, like, gradual and everything, and they're her cry for help, and, like, the final straw. I think that ultimately she was going to give people the tapes anyways, and was hoping that someone would stop her and save her, but in the books they cover it more than they do in the...
And I think that that's another thing. Like, movies tend to cut out important pieces.
They shouldn't have. This was a mini-series, not a movie.
Yeah, I
What
agree.
the hell, Netflix?
I know. Like, they really messed it up.
They had time.
In my experience, like, studying, working with people with mental health, and in my own mental health experiences, generally, people who are at that point, people who are at the point of suicidal thoughts, they're not thinking about, like, who they can blame and let's make everybody feel bad. Often they're thinking, let me help everybody by removing the burden that is me. So I just didn't like how they handled it.
Oh, this could trigger. Woo!
Gotta put a trigger warning with this episode.
It's a very heavy topic.
Yeah, I mean, there is the big debate over whether the school shooting prevalence is more of a gun control issue or a mental health issue. I would argue that it's both.
I personally think it's both.
Yeah.
I agree, Marissa.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Me too.
I got you, girl.
Yeah,
I think circumstance is different.
I think that it's both because, obviously, to get to a point where you feel like that is a good choice or that is something that is the correct choice for you is a place of mental illness. And I think that the stigma, the trouble with accepting these types of people has something to do with that. I also think the pressure on young people has something to do with that. But it also is their ability to get guns. I mean, you can walk into Walmart in Pennsylvania and get a gun.
I could get a gun right now at Walmart, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, the fact that it's that easy, and, like, meanwhile, to get a prescription for mental health, you have to go through several doctors. A lot of insurances have problems with it. You have to go through your insurance company. Someone who is really suffering doesn't have the energy to fight all of those people to get the help that they need at times. So I think sometimes it's a self-perpetuating cycle. There's a lot of things that could help people who are suffering. In addition to medication, there's a lot of holistic remedies, things like acupuncture, things like Ayurveda, types of alternative medicine that also help. Also lifestyle changes, diet changes, exercise changes.
Some people might say the medication triggers people.
It does at times.
Negative outbursts.
That's a good point, Joanna. Like if they overdose or something or don't take enough, like it's
and
or if they stop taking it away.
Yeah. It just all depends on the person and their body type and like their overall family history of like health issues that could easily make somebody more angry or more depressed or make them walk into a movie theater and shoot a bunch of people. It all depends on the person.
And they need to have a good support system too. You know, they need to be going to the right doctors. They need to, you know, have families who, you know, are concerned about them and, you know, will actually say something if they see something that's, you know, like normal.
Well, the process of managing your mental health is very multifaceted. It involves, for some people, medication, therapy, diet and lifestyle changes, maybe tracking what you're going through. There are a lot of good apps that help people track it. Things like meditation, balancing, knowing what you can and can't handle in your life at different times, knowing when it's okay to take a step back. There are a lot of facets. And I think the fact that for some people, something like their medication that's supposed to be making them better is what actually makes them worse it's a tragedy. I mean, I feel like it's a failure on the part of the medical community to an extent. I mean, they've done a lot of great things, but the fact that a side effect of pretty much every antidepressant is suicidal thoughts.
They say that about birth control too.
Well, birth control, I have another series of rants about. Because birth control, the way that it works in most hormonal birth control cases,
not mine.
In most types of hormonal birth control, there is a prevalence of increased depression among users. It's not 100%, obviously, which is a good thing, or they wouldn't be on the market. But there is an increase in that due to the fact that one of the ways that the medication creates the fake hormones is it uses neurotransmitters in your body already to convert them. So sometimes they convert serotonin into the fake progesterone, which for somebody who has low serotonin levels, like those with depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar, for those people, birth control can be deadly. And I think that that's another thing in the medical community. Like, why do women have to choose between being protected and being mentally solvent?
But that's when it comes back to the point of you need to know your own body and what's good for you and what isn't. And if it's not working, that's when you speak out and you say something to prevent the negative side effects from happening in the first place.
And I think that a lot of, granted, the work that people are doing to take the stigma off of mental health is of course important. But I feel like jumping off of what Joanna said and Marissa said and Chelsea has said, that a lot of what they still need to work on is empowering those who suffer from mental health issues, not just those who are aware, because I can be aware all I want, but if the person I'm speaking to has an issue that they have to come to terms with on their own, no matter how many things I say to them, depending on their state, they may not hear me.
Exactly.
So, like, it is, like, people need to understand on a greater level that it is a case-by-case thing and that there's no one-size-fits-all for mental health, just like there's no one-size-fits-all for every human.
Amen.
So.
But what I meant more was if, you know, you're friends with somebody and you see like a drastic change in mood or behavior or just, you know, warning signs, I think people should feel empowered to step up and not be afraid to say something or not being afraid of hurting someone's feelings. Like just saying, hey, I've noticed you seem a little down. What's wrong? Do you want to talk about it? Is everything okay? You know, if people had done that, these shootings would have been avoided. But, you know, maybe some of them would have been able to have been given the health that they needed, and maybe some of them wouldn't have happened. I mean, hindsight's 2020, but I feel like that these are conversations that need to happen, and people should, open their mouth, say something, say something.
This is where I love your honesty, Marissa.
I love it.
It's great.
Girl.
It's showing through. I'm sorry. What is it that I fit in? Candor? Is that the one?
Candor and Divergent.
Yes! I love Divergent too.
We talked Divergent in our last podcast. So,
Joanna, I haven't seen it yet, but they kind of fitted me into that one, so we'll see.
I
still
love
have to
you
watch
already. So.
it's fantastic. But I totally agree with what you were saying. Like, see something, say something. That's not just a quote for like bomb scares. That's very important. And you don't realize how much of a difference that can make to somebody. That can make a huge difference. And it might be the difference that they need that day. A lot of times people feel discouraged because those who are suffering oftentimes can't respond in the way that would give their friend, the person who is reaching out to support them, the kind of reassurance that they're actually doing something meaningful. But never underestimate what you're doing. They know you're there even if they can't process it right now. And in the event of like, can I stick this out or not? Knowing that people are there who would be hurt by it is huge.
I think that like I said, I feel like I'm like, sorry, we just opened a beer and oh my God.
My bad. Sorry.
We have wine and beer. It's great stuff. It's all good.
Wine and beer.
Beer.
It's like
You have beer.
Wine
And beer. Handcrafted beers made in local breweries.
I feel like
I got my Angry Orchard. I'm happy.
All right, I'm pouring more wine.
Put a shot of vodka in it. Vanilla vodka. It's boss. I used to bartend. I got you.
Or if you put Bacardi in Corona Party.
JoJo knows what's up.
What's up? I got you, girl. I got you.
Yeah, but kind of what Marissa was saying with like, if you see something, say something. I think it's important for advocates for mental health and I guess people that are the support systems of individuals suffering from mental health illness or mental health instability. I never know what to say anymore because of PC. But
don't worry about that.
Yeah, I think it's important that people do, even if they're hesitant and they're not sure what they're going to say is right, saying something kind can never hurt. And I think that that's important, like that.
Better than saying nothing at all.
Exactly. Like saying something kind, even if you're like, oh, I don't know how to approach this, it's better than saying nothing. So, yeah.
Good job, Kayla.
Thanks.
She knows all the things.
Kayla knows everything. Kayla's a boss.
All right. So actually, on the topic, but sort of a little bit of a segue, I was researching recently about a new type of remedy for some of these mental illnesses, and I want to know your thoughts on this. So,
I'm very opinionated. I'll help you out, girl. I'll tell you.
all right. So there's this new therapy called virtual reality therapy, which could be used in conjunction with or in place of traditional medication, alternative medication, talk therapy, any type of current treatment for mental health. So there's something called Virtual Bodyworks, which was developed by computer scientists and investigators in the psych department at the University of Barcelona. And the point of it was to foster empathy and also to help people through certain conditions. So it's twofold. It can help people understand a mental illness or a particular type of situation or condition to help break the stigma, or it can help somebody get through something of their own. So what it does is it gives users the feeling of having a different body, and based on what it is in virtual reality, they're able to experience a different mental reality as well because of the things that they're presented with, how difficult they are to them, what they have to work through. They're presented with something that is similar to a mental illness. So there are simulations that include things like experiencing domestic violence from the perspective of a tiny woman. There are things like embodying the body of someone of a different race and experiencing the kind of prejudice that goes with that. They are able to tailor applications to individual psychological issues, such as mood disorders and learning disabilities. They're also able to work with PTSD, body dysmorphia, and virtual reality, where depressed patients experience things that resemble happiness slowly. So I want to talk about the PTSD one, because I think that there's a debate here. Now, the PTSD one, there's two pieces of it. There are ways that it can foster compassion for people who do not experience PTSD. There's something called virtual Iraq. So they're able to experience the kind of things. But
I dated a soldier. Don't trigger. No.
Yeah, it's a little extreme. And then there's also things that slowly increase the exposure to the traumatic stimuli to try to break those who are suffering from PTSD of their fear of it. So what are your thoughts on this? Because I think overall that as technology goes, it's very interesting that they're able to do this. And in certain ways, I think this is a good thing because people are able to experience what others go through. But does it go too far? Is this one of the situations where technology is pushing into a sci-fi kind of place where it shouldn't be?
I wouldn't say sci-fi, but especially when you bring up post-traumatic stress disorder for somebody who's been overseas and has killed people or any other situation, that could easily trigger panic attacks, flashbacks from when they were overseas, flashbacks of when they were abused, and that could increase the suicide risk that we were talking about before. And it probably has its upsides, but I'm just seeing the negatives right now because I'm just more worried from a psychological background that it could easily trigger somebody into going off the edge in that way. I just wanted to say the whole medication thing too. Did I bring that up already? No?
I don't know.
Because if they get triggered and they have the access to the medication, that could easily be a negative influence on everything.
Yeah.
Or something if they're in a virtual reality situation and they're on medication, they could easily have a heart attack or a seizure or something along the lines of that, because if they don't know their overall health background right away, something can easily happen and they're liable for that individual.
And so when I was you both know, Marissa and Chelsea know this from watching me last time we did the podcast. But I have my notepad and I scribble down notes. So as Chelsea's reading this breakdown synopsis, I'm scribbling down notes. And one thing that hit me like a Miley Cyrus wrecking ball.
Yeah, it did.
Hit me like a wrecking ball.
Was that I think it's very, so like you said, all these things the technology is creating, I think that ultimately the people that are creating them are thinking long-term good, but I don't think that they understand something like stepping into someone's race for a day or stepping into the visual reality of what someone is seeing as a young woman in a domestic abuse situation. It's very narrow-minded to think that that's going to give you that experience.
I agree. You're not physically there. You don't understand what the person went through.
And
you can relate to the person.
Yeah.
Like you guys said, speak out, say a kind word, get to know this individual and their situations. But just because you are put in either a chamber or wearing a virtual reality helmet, you're really not going to feel the physical blow of somebody hitting you. You're not going to feel their depression or feel their anxiety. Just, you have to be in that certain situation by yourself, as a person, not the other person.
Yeah, and and the virtual reality of it all, that's why it's called virtual reality. You know you can take the helmet off. If you get too scared of this guy yelling at you in your face and calling you profanities, and you can take the helmet off. People in domestic abuse situations can't take the helmet off.
Good example.
And people who are Black Americans or Asian Americans, they can't take the helmet off. They can't become white privileged Americans.
As they say, the stigma's still there.
Exactly. The stigma's still there. So you can't, I understand that this was made to help, and I understand I can
plus sides to it.
Yeah, of course. And I can sympathize with how the individuals who are creating this were trying to help.
Yes, of course.
But of course, it's not coming from a negative place. But
so were people trying to make the anti-anxiety medication or the antidepressant medication. They had good compassion for people who are going through something. And I love your point, but maybe they're not depressed and they don't really understand how it's significantly, going to impact somebody else's like behavior or mood or anything that they're going through.
Right.
Like, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
I think that no treatment is perfect. It's something that depends on the individual person. It goes back to everybody is different. And what I personally think would be a better way to defeat the stigmas around these things, not that all of these inventions, this technology, these medications, everything is a step. They're all a good step in some ways. I think the best way is to educate people. Like, I feel like it's really sad that, growing up, going through school, everybody knows the Pythagorean theorem, but like ask people if they know like what neurotransmitters control your mood. They don't.
I don't know the Pythagorean theorem. I failed math class.
You know the Pythagorean theorem. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Math is not my forte.
But the fact
either, but don't sell yourself short, girl. I'm sure you got it.
Get it, girl. I love you.
Woo. The fact that they think something like that is critical. Also, like the kind of advanced math that they teach you in high school, like imaginary numbers. Like, who the hell needs imaginary numbers? They waste time on that. But they don't teach you to recognize the signs of mental illnesses or other illnesses or these kind of disorders. Like, there's certain things that are so huge. Like, mental illnesses are typically, and there's debate about the official cause, but typically a result of imbalances in neurotransmitters in your brain. So, but how many people can truly say they know what these neurotransmitters are, what they do, and how to combat them? Like, there's a whole...
Not most people.
True. There's a whole set of things that you can do to balance your neurotransmitters. There are different foods that you can eat to up your serotonin production or your dopamine production or norepinephrine or GABA. And all of these types of neurotransmitters have such a big impact on your overall mental health.
What if people are obese and they don't want to eat that healthy food? How can we help them at the same
well,
rate?
That's its own issue.
I think it goes hand in hand though, because it just depends on how a person is, if they really want to do it or if they don't want to do it.
Food is not the only way you can treat it.
Eating disorder is also a mental health disorder, whether it's bulimia, anorexia, or obesity.
Food is not the only way that you can treat these mental health disorders. It's one way. But if more people were aware of these things, then maybe more people would be able to recognize the signs and get themselves to a point where they were okay beforehand. It's such an issue that not only do we not learn about it in school, but doctors don't even tell patients about this. This is something that is not very well known. And there are people who go through these things that don't realize that, oh, I have depression. I probably should not go on a no-carb diet because carbs regulate my serotonin levels and I'm going to get worse. Things like that. Like, that's something
what about like toddlers and children who have like those cases of depression or the first stage of depression? What are we going to do for them when it comes to that kind of situation?
I mean, in my opinion, I think it comes to recognizing the warning signs, recognizing...
What if they don't? What if the parents are terrible parents or abusive parents? How is that child going to speak for themselves, and what can we do to help them?
Hopefully, general education. If the parent doesn't catch it, maybe their teacher will. Or maybe an aunt will, or another adult in their life.
Yeah, like a teacher or a guidance counselor or something.
I mean, I'm an education person, so I mean, that's kind of my world. And there's a lot that I love about education. There's a lot that I love about education, but I do think in some ways it fails people. And one of the ways is that nobody knows these warning signs, even though they give people courses. Like, now it is a thing where teachers have to take courses to recognize suicidal thoughts. But I don't know. In my opinion, like risk behaviors for suicide and for mental illnesses, I've worked at a number of schools. And public schools, they only go to the very obvious places. Like if they say something like, I'm going to kill myself, take it seriously. They only go to the very obvious places. the only comprehensive training I've had in understanding that this was a risk was working at a behavioral health center.
I work in residential. I feel the same way. You see it all the time, and it's just, I can't even describe what I've seen. I'm obviously not liable to talk about it, but...
Of course. And, none of this is about any particular people that we've actually known or seen. There's no...
I know, I'm just saying...
There's no names in this. But I think that it needs to be something that overall, not just people who are in mandated reporter situations, but people, like in your health class in middle school, they should teach this. Along with showing their scary slides of STDs, they should teach this.
You think the teacher should be more accountable for this nowadays?
Teachers? Yeah. I mean, I think that any adult who is in a position where you're able to see what kids go through on a day-to-day basis, and it isn't just kids, it's adults. So if you're someone who works with adults who might be at risk, this goes for that too. But anybody who's in a position to see where kids are, where adults are, and they see these risk behaviors, they need to be accountable. Even though people in those kind of situations are mandated reporters, all too often they're like, well, that was just one little thing. I don't want to overreact. I'll just let it go. But if you just see one little thing, and then the teacher in the classroom next door just sees one little thing, and then the principal just sees one little thing, and the guidance counselor just sees one little thing, well, that's 4 things that this same kid did that are risk behaviors, but nobody communicated with each other.
That's when communication is key, though. But if they don't talk to each other, how are they supposed to know?
And it does
really have to be trained to do so.
Exactly. Yeah.
Marissa?
They have to be trained to do so, to talk to each other, to communicate.
Exactly.
How else are they going to help?
What if they don't have the training? Would you rather them give the individual the wrong information? They are now responsible for that child's actions because they gave the wrong input.
Joanna is saying, in conjunction with what you and Chelsea are saying, is that there's a huge difference between an English teacher who is in her high school classroom who happened to have a cousin who committed suicide when he was 15, who is aware of mental health and the triggers and the trauma and the warning signs because she has had that information. And then an English teacher in another school district, same type of classroom, who has never had to deal with any anything in that mental health field before, who is just going based off of what she thinks is right and kind and good. So there is a huge difference, and
they are not able to deal with it themselves, and they can say, oh, I will refer you to this guidance counselor, this therapist, or everyone has to have some general knowledge. They can't just be like, oh well, and have these kids fall through the cracks.
I agree with Marissa in the sense that there needs to be more education overall. But are you talking in terms of teachers who are trying to give the child advice?
Yeah, I think we are all talking about
giving the child advice directly.
Who may try to intervene directly because they're the person that child's been talking to.
Yeah.
Or a young adult has been talking to. And I have something, once you're done, I have something to say about it too that goes beyond just the teacher, because I'm from a family of teachers and I have a lot of perspectives on this that go beyond just I'm sure they want the training, but whether or not there's funding or
well, that's another story too.
Other can of worms.
Okay.
Marissa, yes.
Okay. So if you're talking about a teacher who's directly speaking to a student, who is specifically giving advice directly to a student, in that kind of sense, I think that they need to be careful. Everybody does. If you're not a therapist, you shouldn't be giving therapist-style advice. You can be giving lifestyle advice, here are some things that make me feel better when things are difficult for me, but you should always, always, always report it and refer it to the correct people.
We're mandated reporters in that scenario. We'd be sued and liable for that individual if we didn't.
Right.
For my past work, I would have gone to jail if I did not report half the suicide attempts at my previous job.
I think that if you are not in a position where you are comfortable giving your own advice, and you're not in a position where you are someone who should be giving your own advice on dealing with mental health or suicidal thoughts, then your best bet is to listen to the child and just tell them that you're there for them, that there's a safe place with you, and that you're going to help them get help. And then make sure that they get to the correct person who can do that. In my opinion, that's what I feel like a teacher who doesn't feel that they have the training should be able to do.
True.
I do see a lot of students who are dealing with this kind of thing. So, but yeah, that is typically I just let them know that they're safe, I'm listening, and make sure that I refer it to the right people.
Like Chelsea said, it's all about how you handle it. You report it the right way. And like I said, I've had to report abuse cases where I was on the phone with the main counsel line for almost 4 hours.
Oh my
They had
goodness.
me on hold. How many in Massachusetts? It's reported like hundreds and hundreds a day, and they have to do follow-up cases, and just some of the things you see, it's just beyond your imagination.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine that.
Let me just say that's why I'm taking a break right now, because I took a lot of it home with me. They tell you not to bring it home with you, but you do, because you just feel for the kids. What was that?
I said something like that you can't help but bring home.
Oh, God bless, no. Because you relate to these individuals and you find out what they like to make them happy. And I think that's an important factor, too. You can relate to these individuals and find out what really makes them smile, what really puts them in a positive place, because they've been in, quote unquote, the darkness for so long. You just give them that opportunity to kind of shine in their own way and like relate to another person, which sometimes they don't get to do for like half their life already, 15, 16-year-old kids. And I know I have no right to call them kids, but they seem so much younger than they are, and they've already been through so much more than we could ever think about.
Yeah.
In our 30 years right now. I'm just thinking about it right now. The intensity is crazy.
Oh, we're getting heavy tonight.
Everybody take another sip of their drink.
Woo, cheers.
Cheers. And I think that Joanna's prior sentiments bring up a good point, that I think that one group that may get kind of pushed under the cracks because maybe they're in the system already, or they're in residential homes, or individuals who suffer from mental illness because of situational things, not necessarily because of chemical things. And I think that making sure you identify those individuals as individuals that have that need and want that help, and that support is so important.
They want somebody to care about them, because almost all of the kids that I work with never had that. Since they were born, they were just unhappy, and they just went out on their own at like 10 years old. And it's just, I know it's horrible to say, but that's not the way society should be. Mm-hmm. Not like political and all that shit, but it's hard. It's really hard.
And I think, Kayla, you brought up a really good point. Not everybody who deals with these episodes of mental illness is dealing with it as a result of a chemical imbalance. And I think that's important to point out. Oftentimes, people deal with bouts of depression, anxiety, PTSD, all different types of mental illnesses because of situations in their lives. And how do you think that we can best support those people and combat their issues in order to help these people so that they're heard in the same sense and they're not grouped in with like, well, you should just do all these things to balance your chemistry if that's not really the problem?
I think that as difficult as it is for any individual, I think that this can be said for whether you're dealing with mental illness or not. I think one of the most difficult things as a human being, and I think that approaching this as human beings to human beings is important.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that it's really hard for us to show weakness or vulnerability.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that for someone that's dealing with some type of trauma that's causing them to have depressive episodes or PTSD or anything, like regardless of the severity of it, it's still difficult to be that vulnerable. But I think in my opinion, and again, for anybody that wasn't listening to the last podcast, I'm an English major. I just read a lot. So I don't come from a psychology background, a sociology background, an education background, although my family is a family of teachers and counselors. But that said, I am a human being, and as a human being, I think talking to someone, especially professional, is so important.
Amen.
learning to come to terms with what you're dealing with and seeing it not as like an impediment to your character, but as just a part of yourself is so important. I think one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to misquote it, but there was a quote in Game of Thrones that Tyrion Lannister says.
Yes, good quote.
It's something like never forget who you are. The world certainly will not wear it as armor, and it can never be used to hurt you. And I think that that's so, or used against you. Joanna loves Game of Thrones more than I do.
Game of Thrones is my life, queen.
But I think it's important to embrace who you are.
I probably should.
Yeah, girl, I'll buy the DVDs.
But like embracing who you are, the positive and perceived negatives is so important, because some of the negative stuff that you go through and the crap and I'll say it, the shit that people go through can actually help them become better, more empathetic people.
It's all about relating.
And it's all about, like you said, Joanna, relating. It's all about talking to people, finding a professional, seeking out help, because seeking out help is not a weakness, it's a strength.
Amen.
So I think that that's something that I would tell someone to answer your question.
Absolutely. Kay, I love your Tyrion quote. I love your point. And you drink and you know things. So there you go.
Yeah!
Woo!
Get it, Tyrion Jr.
Tyrion, we love him. Also, Peter Dinklage lives around where I am. And I've never met him, but apparently he's the coolest dude ever, so. Yay.
I'm gonna find him. I will.
Well, Joe, you need to come visit, and then we can, hunt him down.
All right, I'm in. Tomorrow, I'll call out.
All right.
Not really. I don't want to get fired.
But when you come visit sometime.
Yes. Oh, wait. Where is it? I'll find it, Kayla. Because it was my cover photo on Facebook.
The quote that I, semi-quoted correctly, she's got the actual quote. Okay. Here we go.
Hold on. I got to load this because you have no internet in your house, right?
No, I do.
It says, never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you.
Yeah. Tyrion knows what's up.
Let me give a shout out to Game of Thrones, because I did not come up with that tagline. They did. So, George R.R. Martin, muchas gracias.
You know what's another
I need to watch Game of Thrones.
You know what's another great quote that I think works for mental illness? It's not from Game of Thrones, but the Harry Potter quote. Is this all happening in my head? Well, of course it's happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean it's not real?
I can relate to that, because I also agree with the Harry Potter quotes, but happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, when one only remembers about the light.
Yes.
Boom.
That's a good one.
I think these are fantastic, and the thing that I like about, of course it's happening in your head, but why should that mean it's not real, is that one of the reasons that I feel like mental illness is so stigmatized is that people don't see it. You can walk around looking like a totally put-together person, and oftentimes they do. People who
it's true.
Suffer with this.
Very
so,
true.
Someone might look at them and be like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're making that up. It's in your head. Well, yes, it's in your head, but it's a real thing. And we need to acknowledge it as much as we would acknowledge a broken leg. So telling somebody who is clinically depressed to just snap out of it and be happy is like telling somebody who has a broken leg, just get up and run. It's the same thing. And we need to be able to respect it as such. Okay, how about this? One thing that makes you happy, like a tip to be happy.
What makes you happy, Kayla Ann? No, that doesn't count.
Yes, it does.
You're eating chips.
Exercise.
All right, exercise is a good one. Gives you energy, gives you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy, and happy people don't shoot their husbands. They just don't. Woo!
Except from Legally Blonde.
Hell yeah!
So what makes us happy? I have a list. My cat. I won't go that far. My cat, because she's my child. Harry Potter, because it puts me in a positive space.
Reading.
And just being around with my group of friends or my family just puts me in a good vibe. So I'll say that. And eating suits me.
I'm going to say food in general, because I love cooking and I love baking.
Cook for me.
I would say like nature makes me happy, especially like flowers and like the warm feel of like the sunshine on your face. That always puts me in a good mood. I like being outside. Music, I like singing, stuff like that, and just like being with my friends and being with people. That they always put me in a good mood.
Those are all great suggestions. Girl. Yeah. All right. I would say,
and there's other stuff too, but that's the main thing.
And having girly time with us.
Hell yeah. Friends, that's number 1. Being around awesome people, connecting, having fun. So, take the time to be around your people. Also, my cats, so animals in general. Reading, music, singing, dancing, acting, performing, musical theater, all of the above. This theater is just like the best escape I've ever found in the world, and the most accepting group of people. There's so many diverse types of people in theater, and I love it. So that, making sure you take time for yourself. Whether for you that means... Self-care, yeah. Whether for you that means exercise, watch a great show, read a great book, take a bath, take a walk, be outside, whatever that means for you.
I love baths.
Taking time for yourself and respecting yourself.
Mom.
So knowing your limits, knowing when you have had enough of something, and being able to stand up for yourself. Those are my self-care tips, I think. Being able to respect yourself.
Sorry, you just said knowing when you've had enough of something, and I'm like...
Kayla's chugging her wine, and she's like, I've had enough. This was the best podcast ever. My first podcast, the best one. I love it.
Thanks for joining us again this week for our special Mental Health Awareness Month edition of the Sapio Files. If you would like to join the conversation, leave a comment, ask a question, or suggest a topic for a future podcast, you can contact us. We have an email, sapiofilespodcast@gmail.com. We are on Twitter and Instagram @TheSapioFiles. You can like and follow our Facebook page, The Sapio Files. Leave us a comment, leave us a message. And always rate and review us on the iTunes app. Thanks for joining us again. Stay curious.